I'm Naomi Bennett, 31, an interior designer based in Seattle. The ballroom smelled like polished silverware and sugared roses. Gold-trimmed white linen lined each table. Strings of soft piano notes floated through the air, barely masking the anxious laughter from distant cousins and old college friends. My engagement party had the elegance of a small wedding. I'd worked on every detail: the floral centerpieces, the candlelit paths, the glass name cards engraved in cursive. Everything glowed, but I didn't. I stood at the foot of the stage, hands cold despite the wine I hadn't touched. My fiancé David's arm warm against mine. My mother hadn't arrived yet, or so I thought. I was looking around, scanning for her familiar frame when a soft murmur rose from the left side of the room. Heads turned, a clatter of forks, then a silence. She was already here. Mom stood by the dessert table, holding a glass of sparkling water like it was poisoned. Her face immaculate as always, lips like iron was frozen into a half-smile as she whispered something to Aunt Lydia. Lydia gasped, her eyes flicking straight to David, then to me, then down. I felt the heat crawl up my throat. I walked over. I was halfway there when I heard it clear. Cutting. "Let's be honest," Mom said, tapping her manicured nail against her flute. "He's not marrying her for love. He's marrying her for money." Someone dropped a spoon. David heard it. I knew he did. He shifted his weight, jaw clenched. "Mom." I tried to keep my voice low. "Can we talk outside?" She didn't move. "You really think he'd propose if your father hadn't left you that inheritance?" She laughed lightly, almost like a cough. "Naomi, sweetie, I raised you smarter than this." The hush spread like spilled wine. I said, "Let's talk outside." I repeated, louder this time, but before I could steer her away, a waiter gently tapped my shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, lowering his voice. "Your presence is not requested on stage just yet. Mrs. Holloway said she's delivering the toast now." I blinked. "But I'm the one hosting." "She said your mother's already begun the toast. She asked us to dim the lights." I looked up. Sure enough, someone had darkened the chandeliers. Mom was adjusting the mic stand. My name was on every invitation, every place card, every RSVP. But I wasn't allowed on my own stage. If you've ever been pushed to the edge of your own celebration, silenced, doubted, or overlooked, I'd love to know. Drop a comment or tell me where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if you've ever had to swallow your truth in front of people who called it too much. Mom's voice echoed across the ballroom. "We just want to make sure Naomi isn't rushing into something impractical, especially when certain people around her might have their own motives." A few people laughed tight, forced. David stood up, but it wasn't him who changed everything. From the back of the room, a firm voice rang out. "Excuse me, are you implying I have motives?" Gasps followed. Heads whipped around. "Doctor." Susan Hale stepped forward, her gold necklace catching the light. CEO of the architecture firm where I designed luxury interiors, my secret mentor, silent investor, and the woman whose last name had signed off on 3 of my biggest contracts in the past year. Mom's face went pale. "I'm sorry, but before we throw accusations," Dr. Hale said, calm and clear, "you should know your daughter earned her success. That inheritance. She never touched it. Everything she owns, she built with me." Whispers rippled. Someone dropped a champagne flute. David took my hand. The spotlight turned. The silence felt thicker, fuller, like the air itself was apologizing. And in that moment, as every eye landed on me, for the first time that night, I was seen. People clapped. Not loudly, not in unison, just scattered, confused, uncertain applause, like they didn't know if this was a speech or a reckoning. Dr. Hale didn't wait for a reply. She walked straight to me and David, her heels clicking like punctuation on marble tile. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "I'm sorry," she said to me, voice low but firm. "I didn't mean to interrupt. But when someone attacks your character or the person you love, you don't just stand and watch." David, still holding my hand, nodded. "Thank you," he said, quietly. Mom hadn't moved from the stage. She was still gripping the microphone, her fingers rigid around the metal. The room stayed silent. I glanced at the event coordinator, who gave me a nervous thumbs up from behind the curtain. I didn't walk up to the stage. I didn't make a toast. I just walked straight past it and out the side door into the hallway, heels clacking like gunfire on tile. David followed. The hallway smelled like eucalyptus and wax polish. Clean, quiet. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but the nod was a lie. That moment when she called him a gold digger in front of everyone didn't come from nowhere. It was the result of years, decades, even. My mother never trusted kindness. She never believed people helped without an angle. Maybe because she never did. Back when I was younger, she used to say things like, "People only smile when they want something," and when I asked her what she wanted when she smiled, she'd just laugh and say, "To be left alone." It's hard to explain what it's like growing up in a house where you're given everything except warmth. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. "David," I whispered. "Maybe we shouldn't have done this." He looked like I'd slapped him. "You don't mean that." "I mean the party, not the engagement. She was always going to find a way to twist it." He nodded slowly. "Do you want to leave now?" I said. "But I don't want to pretend either. I'm tired of pretending she didn't just humiliate you." He looked me in the eyes. "She didn't humiliate me. She humiliated herself." I wanted to believe him, but all I felt was the same hollow twist in my gut that I used to feel in high school when she'd joke in front of my friends that I looked like I ate too much bread that week, or when she'd accidentally forget to pick me up from art class and make it sound like I was the irresponsible one. We stayed in that hallway for a few minutes, just breathing. Then my phone buzzed. It was Aunt Lydia. I didn't pick up. David checked his watch. "We should go back in." I nodded, wiped beneath my eyes, and fixed my lipstick in a hallway mirror that had a gold frame shaped like vines. When I stepped back into the ballroom, the energy had shifted. My cousin smiled a little too widely. The guests were now eyeing Dr. Hale with curiosity and admiration. My mother was nowhere to be seen. I went to the bar and asked for club soda. The bartender gave me a sympathetic look. "Rough night," I gave a one-shouldered shrug. "Comes with the ring, apparently." He chuckled. "Well, if it helps everyone's on your side." I smiled politely, but I didn't want sides. I just wanted peace, or at least quiet. I spotted my best friend Maya waving at me from a table near the back. I made my way over. "You need to breathe," she said, immediately standing and pulling me into a hug. "And a plate of carbs." She handed me a plate of mini sliders and truffle fries. I laughed, actually laughed for the first time that night. "You saw the whole thing?" I asked. "I saw the moment your mother became the villain in a Netflix miniseries." She deadpanned. "Too bad I can't cancel her subscription. She canceled herself." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The night blurred into a string of awkward smiles, cautious conversations, and little touches from David, his hand on my back. A soft squeeze of my fingers, a glance across the room that told me I wasn't alone. But in my mind, I kept replaying Mom's words. He's marrying her for money. Not because I believed it, but because I knew she did. Because in her world, everything was a transaction. The party ended around 11. David and I stayed behind with the staff to thank everyone, pack up some leftovers, and collect the centerpiece candles I wanted to keep for the wedding. When we stepped outside, the air was sharp and sweet with rain. Our car was already waiting. That's when I saw her, Mom, sitting in the back seat of her own car, parked right across from ours. Windows down halfway, fingers tight around the steering wheel like she wasn't driving anywhere, just watching. David opened our door, then paused. "Do you want to talk to her?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Just me." He gave a small nod and stepped back. I crossed the street slowly. The sound of my heels on wet pavement echoed more than it should have. She didn't roll down the window further, didn't invite me in. I leaned in. "You said things tonight you can't take back." She looked away. They needed to be said. "No," I replied. "You needed to say them. There's a difference." Silence. "I'm not your reflection. Mom, I'm not living out your regrets. And David isn't my mistake, he's my choice." She didn't look at me, just stared at the windshield like the night was some kind of fog she could disappear into. "I know what people want," she said finally. "I know the game. This isn't a game." She didn't respond. I stepped back. "Drive safe." And I turned around before she could answer, before she could ask for forgiveness in the only language she knew, silence and distance. David opened the car door for me. As I slid in, he didn't ask me what she said. He didn't need to. He just reached over and took my hand. And we drove off through the rain, leaving her behind in the empty parking lot. Back home. I took off my heels and sat on the living room floor, hair still in place, makeup barely smudged. I watched David disappear into the kitchen and come back with 2 mugs of hot tea. He handed me one, sat across from me, and said, "So, we still getting married?" I smiled into my cup. "You sure you're not just in it for the catering budget?" He grinned, busted. We clinked mugs, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for my happiness. The following morning, the sky over Seattle was pale and indecisive, as if the sun couldn't quite commit to showing up. I stayed in bed longer than usual, tangled in the linen sheets with my phone buzzing every few minutes on the nightstand. I didn't check it. I already knew what I'd find: texts from cousins pretending to be neutral, voice messages from Aunt Lydia asking if Mom could swing by, and a dozen Instagram notifications tagging me in blurry photos from the party. David had left early for a client meeting. He'd kissed my forehead gently and whispered, "Don't read the comments." Of course. I did. One of the photos had already gone semi-viral in our small circle, a shot of me, standing just off stage, eyes hollow, while my mother clutched the mic. The caption read, "Engagement party or family intervention." There were laughing emojis in the comments. Someone from college wrote, "Naomi always had dramatic flair." Another chimed in, "Phew, if looks could kill." That mom, though. I tossed the phone aside and pulled the comforter over my head. It had only been 12 hours, but the party already felt like a myth retold by people who weren't even there. By noon, I finally dragged myself into the kitchen. I wasn't hungry, but I needed something to do with my hands. I started slicing lemons for tea, methodically, almost mechanically. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. A long silence. Another ring. I walked to the door, heart quickening, and checked the peephole. Mom. She was standing on the porch in a cream-colored coat, sunglasses despite the gray sky, holding something wrapped in brown paper. I opened the door, slowly. "I brought muffins," she said. I stared at her. Muffins. "They're from that bakery you like, the one on 3rd. She handed them over like a peace treaty written in sugar. I didn't take them. "Why are you here?" "I thought we should talk." I stepped back without a word, letting her enter. She moved through my apartment like a realtor, scanning every detail as if appraising it. "I see you redecorated," she said, eyes on the new rug I'd imported from Morocco. "Looks expensive." "It's called taste, not status." She flinched slightly but recovered. "Naomi, I didn't mean to embarrass you last night. Then why did you say what you did? I was protecting you." "No, you were protecting me." She blinked. "Excuse me. You've been afraid of love your whole life, and you hate me now." The silence between us was dense. I walked to the kitchen counter, finally taking the muffins and setting them down on the table. "You always assume people want something from me," I said. "Why?" "Because that's what you did with them." Her face stiffened. "Don't bring your father into this." "Why not?" "He left, and you never let him forget. You turned his absence into your identity, and you wanted me to do the same. That's not true, isn't it?" I pointed to the living room. "You walked into my engagement party and hijacked it because you were scared of being irrelevant. You couldn't stand that I had something without meeting you." She looked down at her hands. "He looks too good to be true." "Naomi, excuse me, you just don't know what that looks like." I could see her crying, but she tried to hold the pieces together. "I didn't grow up in a world where men stayed," she whispered. "My mother taught me that being alone was safer." "I'm not you," I said. "I get to choose something else." We stood there for a long time, the silence broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, she spoke. "I did some research after the party." I raised an eyebrow. "Research?" I looked David up. She hesitated. "I found his salary records and his business filings." I narrowed my eyes. "You what I needed to know if I was wrong." The idea that she'd dug through my fiancé's financials behind my back made my chest tighten. "And were you?" I asked. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "He's worth more than you. His company's doing well, better than I assumed. He didn't need your inheritance. He doesn't even know how much it is." "Does he know?" "Because it doesn't matter to us." She stared at me for a long time, then finally sat on the edge of the couch, something softening in her shoulders. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Be happy for you. Be proud, without being afraid." I took a seat across from her, then start by not sabotaging me in public. She nodded. "I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever gotten." For a while, we just sat there, sipping tea, pretending to be women who understood each other. Eventually, she stood. "I'll go. I just wanted to say that." As she reached the door, she turned back. "Your father would have liked him. You know, it caught me off guard." "You think so?" She gave a soft, nostalgic laugh. "Well, they both dressed terribly. So yes." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thanks for the muffins." She nodded. Then she left. After she was gone, I sat in the quiet, staring at the half-empty tea mug on the table. I didn't feel triumphant, just still. That evening, David came home with takeout and a new stack of client brochures. "How was today?" he asked, settling beside me. "She came over." His brow lifted. "Seriously, she brought muffins." He smirked. "Bribery." "Maybe. Did she apologize?" I nodded. "In her way?" He leaned back, looking at me with that steady gaze I'd come to rely on. "Are we okay?" he asked. I thought about it. About all of it. "I think we're better than okay," I said, because for the first time, my mother had stepped into my world and didn't try to take it over. Maybe that was all I could ask. Maybe that was enough. 2 days later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was hand-addressed, in my mother's sharp, elegant cursive. The envelope was a pale gray, the kind she used for condolence letters. Inside was a single ivory card that read, "Sunday brunch. Just us. No speeches." There was no signature, but I knew the handwriting too well. I sat with it in my lap for almost an hour, turning it over again and again like it might change. A week ago, I would have torn it up. A year ago, I wouldn't have gotten it in the first place. But now I wasn't sure what I wanted from her, but maybe, for once, she didn't know what she wanted from me either. That was new. Sunday arrived too quickly. The weather was soft, overcast but not cold. The kind of gray Seattle morning that smelled like wet concrete and bakery sugar. I wore a navy blouse and simple gold earrings, nothing too sharp, nothing too soft. Neutral armor. When I pulled up to her house, the hedge out front was trimmed into sharp rectangles, and the windows gleamed like they'd been polished just for the occasion. Her silver Lexus was already parked in the driveway. Of course. She was early to her own invitation. The door opened before I knocked. "You're 5 minutes late," she said, not unkindly. "You're 10 minutes early," I replied. She almost smiled. Touché. She stepped aside and let me in. The foyer smelled like lemons and orchids, just like it always had. My childhood home hadn't changed. Not really. Same glass-topped coffee table, same Persian rug with a wine stain she pretended not to see. The kitchen, though, had been remodeled, sleek white cabinets, black marble island, expensive wine fridge humming in the corner. She poured mimosas without asking. "I got the good orange juice," she said. "Didn't know there was a bad kind?" I said, and she gave a short laugh. We sat at the breakfast nook, a place where I'd once done math homework and pretended not to cry when she critiqued my posture. The table was set for 2 white linen napkins, porcelain plates, and a glass tray of miniature quiches and smoked salmon toasts. "This is nice," I said carefully. "I wanted it to be." We ate in silence for a few minutes. It wasn't awkward, just quiet, like 2 people learning a new language they'd only ever shouted in. Eventually, she said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About projection." I sipped my mimosa. Yeah, I didn't want to believe it. But you're right. I always assumed people were using me, even when they weren't. And I raised you to watch your back, not to open your heart. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to interrupt what felt like the slow crumbling of a dam. She looked up, meeting my eyes. "But you've built something different. You didn't turn out like me." I exhaled, long and steady. That was always the goal. She nodded. "You were always braver than I gave you credit for." We sat there, words suspended like dust motes in sunlight. Then she stood and walked to a side drawer. She returned with an old photo in a wooden frame. It was a picture of her and my father, taken in the early years. She was laughing, eyes closed, head thrown back. He had his arm around her, grinning at the camera. "I used to hate this picture," she said softly, "because it reminded me that he left. But now I look at it and think this was real. Once. Even if it didn't last." She slid it across the table toward me. "Keep it," she said. "You deserve to know love isn't always a lie." I stared at the photo. I'd never seen that version of her before. Not just the younger woman, but the softness in her body language, the abandon. I wondered if that version still lived somewhere inside her. I took the frame and set it gently in my bag. "Thanks," I said. "That means more than you probably know." She nodded, and for the first time, I noticed the way her hands trembled slightly when she lifted her glass. She was aging. We both were. But she had always been so composed, so rigid. Seeing that flicker of fragility made her feel suddenly human. We talked for another hour, about the wedding plans, about the venue David and I were leaning toward a converted greenhouse on Bainbridge Island. She didn't scoff. She didn't criticize. She just listened. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. "Naomi," she said, her voice thinner now. "I hope I didn't ruin everything with what I said." I looked at her, this woman who had been a storm in my life for so long. "No," I said honestly. "You cracked something open. Maybe that's what needed to happen." She reached out and, cautiously, touched my shoulder. It wasn't a hug, but it was close. "Let me help with the planning," she said. "Not control it, just help." I gave a small smile. "We'll see." When I got home, David was lying on the couch, laptop open on his chest. Hair a mess. "How was brunch?" he asked without looking up. I kicked off my shoes. "She didn't accuse you of anything, didn't compare me to a disappointment." And she gave me a photo of her and Dad. David paused and looked at me. "That sounds borderline affectionate." "I know. I'm suspicious too." I joined him on the couch, curling my legs under his. "She wants to help with the wedding," I said. He winced. "Danger zone?" "Yeah," I agreed. "But maybe we give her a piece she can't ruin, like the napkin folding or something." He laughed. "That's the spirit. We stayed like that for a long time. No big revelations, just warmth, silence that didn't feel like punishment." Later that evening, I went to my studio office and opened my email. A new message was waiting from a hotel chain I'd pitched a design proposal to months ago. I clicked. "Congratulations, Ms. Bennett. We've selected your firm for our Pacific Northwest Interiors project." I stared at the screen. My firm. It had started as a solo project, late nights, freelance jobs, Craigslist clients who paid in cash and panic. But now it was real. I was being seen, not just as someone's daughter, not as someone's fiancé, but as me. I printed out the email and pinned it to my mood board, right next to the inspiration swatches for the wedding. And then, in a moment, I couldn't explain. I took the photo of my parents from my bag and placed it beside the contract, because this time, I didn't need to hide one part of my life to honor another. I could hold both. The weeks that followed moved with an odd rhythm, equal parts calm and caution. David and I settled into a flow of early wedding planning, tasting menus, fabric samples, guest lists that grew and shrank like tides. I kept waiting for the moment when things would spin out again, for my mother to burst through another carefully drawn boundary, but it didn't happen. Not yet. Instead, she started sending me articles about minimalist chic floral palettes and suggestions for eco-friendly invitations. They came by email. No commentary. Just links. At first, I rolled my eyes, but then I noticed something. She wasn't telling me what to choose. She was just offering ideas. One day, she even sent me a spreadsheet titled Possible Vendors Reviewed. It was detailed, color-coded, obsessively thorough. "Your mom missed her calling as a wedding coordinator," David joked as he peered over my shoulder. I laughed. "She would have terrified half the brides." He nudged me, "But she might have saved the other half a fortune." And that was the strange thing. Her interference no longer felt like sabotage. It felt like effort. Awkward, clumsy effort, but effort all the same. She was trying, in her way. Still, there were wounds, and not all of them were shallow. One night, we were seated on the couch, folding RSVPs while watching reruns of Chopped, when I got a text from Maya. "Hey, just a heads up, your mom talked to Rachel." Rachel, my college roommate, someone I'd invited to the party but hadn't heard from since. I called Maya immediately. She reached out through Facebook. Maya said, voice careful, said she wanted to clarify some stories from college, about David, about you. Rachel said it felt invasive. My stomach dropped. She's still investigating, looks like it. I'm sorry. Nay. I hung up before I started crying. David looked over. What's wrong? I shook my head. Just old habits. The next day, I called her. I didn't text. I didn't email. I wanted her to hear my voice when I asked, "Did you message Rachel Silence?" "I did," she said finally. Why I needed to understand where he came from, who he was before you met him. "That's not your job," I snapped. "I'm your mother." "No, you're my mother, not his interrogator." She exhaled sharply. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. You weren't trying to trust me either." There was a pause on the line. Then fine. I'll stop. You've made your choice. I'll stay out of it. I almost laughed at the predictability of it. It's not about staying out. It's about staying human. You can care without spying. You can support without control. But I knew she didn't understand that language yet. So I ended the call, went to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face until the sting numbed everything. David didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. That night, he sat beside me in silence, his hand on my back, grounding me like a weight I actually wanted to carry. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I received a letter, not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter in a cream envelope with gold foil edging, her handwriting again. I waited until after dinner to open it. "Naomi, you're right. I crossed a line. I know it's hard to believe, but I didn't reach out to Rachel to dig up dirt. I reached out because I don't know how to stop bracing for impact. I thought if I could spot a crack, I could save you from it. But maybe the only thing that needs saving is my idea of what's safe. I'm trying. I know I don't get points for trying this late in the game, but I see you. I do. I'm learning to see you for who you are, not who I feared you'd become. Tell David I'm sorry. Tell him I want to start over. Not as watchdog, as family." Mom, I read it 3 times. Then again, under the dim kitchen light. The handwriting shook near the end. Not dramatically, but enough to see that she didn't write it in her usual cold poise. She wrote it like someone afraid of being misunderstood. Or worse, ignored. I handed the letter to David without saying anything. He read it in silence, then folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "She means it," he said. "I think she does. Then let's invite her to dinner." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure she has to meet the real me eventually? Might as well do it with risotto." We picked the following Saturday. I cooked. David set the table. My hands were steady the whole time, and I wasn't sure if that was courage or numbness. Probably both. She arrived 5 minutes early, classic, and brought a bottle of wine I actually liked, which was rare. She wore a soft lavender blouse and no pearls. That alone was telling. David opened the door. "Good evening, Mrs. Bennett." She gave a tight smile. "It's Carol. Please." I watched them shake hands. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't icy. I'd take it. Dinner was roasted chicken, mushroom risotto, and lemon asparagus. We kept conversation light, work updates, a new museum exhibit, the weather. But toward the end of the meal, she surprised me. "David," she said, "I was wrong. About you." He looked up, fork halfway to his mouth. She continued, "You're not who I expected, and that scared me. But I realize now that fear isn't your responsibility." He nodded slowly. "Thank you. That means a lot." She turned to me. "And Naomi, I want to be there for the wedding. Really be there. But only if you want me." I hesitated. "We'll have to talk about what that means. What it looks like." She nodded. "I'll follow your lead." After she left, David wrapped his arms around me in the kitchen while we washed dishes. That was progress, he said. It was surreal, I corrected. He kissed the side of my head. Surreal's better than hostile. I looked around at the quiet apartment, the lingering scent of rosemary and garlic, the way the wine glasses still held little echoes of the conversation. I exhaled deeply. We were far from healed. But maybe, for the first time, we weren't bleeding. The closer we got to the wedding, the more everything began to feel unreal. Like I was floating through someone else's perfectly lit Pinterest board, just waiting for the moment it all fell apart. We had the venue locked down, a lush greenhouse tucked away in Bainbridge, with glass walls and ivy-covered beams. The guest list was finalized, menus selected, dresses fitted, and somehow, Carol, my mother, was behaving like a human being. Not perfect, but not destructive, either. She sent emails with subject lines like quick thought, ignore if you hate it, and they were genuinely helpful. She called once a week to check in, not to control, just to check. She even offered to contribute financially. I can help with the floral budget, she said one afternoon over coffee. Consider it my apology fund. I smiled. That's generous. I also feel responsible for the fact that your florist probably hates me after my Pinterest board critique. We both laughed, and it didn't feel forced. And yet, there was a quiet thread of tension still buried in everything. A few days later, I was at the studio reviewing fabric samples when Maya texted, "Call me when you have a sec. It's about Carol." I stepped into the stairwell and dialed immediately. What happened? She came by my office. What she said, she wanted to apologize. Said she wanted to understand you better. So she thought she'd talk to someone who actually knows you. I froze. I don't think she meant harm, Maya continued. But she asked a lot of questions. Stuff about your past relationships, your old business partners, even mentioned that scholarship you turned down in college. I felt the pressure in my chest tighten. Why would she bring that up? She said she's just trying to fill in the blanks. The blanks. Always the blanks. My mother had never trusted silence. She filled it with suspicion. Thanks for telling me, I said. I'll handle it. That night, I sat across from Carol at her place. She'd made salmon and rice. Simple. A peace offering. I heard you visited Maya, I said, pushing the rice around with my fork. She didn't look surprised. She's your best friend. I wanted to know who you were when I wasn't watching. I met her gaze. I don't need you to investigate me anymore. I wasn't investigating. You were collecting ammunition. For what? I don't know, but that's what it felt like. She set down her fork. Naomi. I didn't mean to pry. You just couldn't help yourself, I said quietly. Because you're still trying to find the version of me you can believe in. Her eyes softened. Maybe I don't know how to believe in people without proof, and maybe that's not my burden to carry. We sat in silence for a while. Not hostile, but not warm. Either. Finally, she said, "You're right. I'm still learning how to step back without disappearing, how to love without needing control." I nodded. It's a long road, and I'm late to the starting line. You showed up. That counts for something. She gave a quiet smile. I'm trying. Naomi, even when I get it wrong. You will, I said. But try anyway. 2 weeks before the wedding, we hosted a small pre-celebration dinner at our apartment, just a few friends and family. Low-key. Mostly takeout and laughter. David's parents flew in from Denver. They were soft-spoken and affectionate. The kind of people who hugged too long and brought framed photos of David as a kid to share like rare collectibles. Carol showed up with a bottle of Pinot Noir and a bouquet of calla lilies. She handed the flowers to David's mother. These are for you. I thought white would suit your energy. His mom blinked, surprised. Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you. And somehow, it was genuine. We played board games. We passed around dumplings. At one point, I caught Carol laughing at something David's father said, really laughing. Her eyes crinkled, her posture loose. When the night ended, she hugged me gently. Thank you for letting me be part of this. You are part of it, I said. And in that moment, I meant it. But later, after everyone had left and I was folding napkins in the kitchen, David walked in and leaned against the counter. You okay? I nodded. It's just weird, having her here and not holding my breath the whole time. Maybe that's what healing feels like, he said. Not comfort, just less panic. I smiled. You should write a book. Already started. Chapter 1. Dealing with difficult mothers-in-law without losing your sanity. I threw a towel at him. He caught it and said, more seriously, you've done the work. Naomi, you set boundaries. You made space. You let her earn her way back in. Sometimes I wonder if I let her in too far. Maybe, but you can always adjust the gate. I nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe I can. The final week before the wedding was a blur. Dress fittings, seating charts, late-night trips to the craft store. Carol helped in small ways printing tags, picking up ribbons, even bringing us lunch when we forgot to eat. One afternoon, as we arranged the place cards together, she paused. Your father would be proud of you, she said. I looked up. You think so? He'd be overwhelmed by you, she said, and confused by your taste in men. But yes, proud. I laughed. You're terrible. I'm learning, she said, half smiling. From you. We finished the cards in silence, the sound of the pen scratching across cardstock oddly comforting. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror in my wedding dress. The final fitting. It hugged me just right. Simple. Silk. Elegant. I looked like the version of myself I always imagined but never thought I'd actually get to be. Carol stood behind me, adjusting the veil. You look like yourself, she said softly. That's the highest compliment I can give. I turned and hugged her, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. She held on for a moment, then whispered, You taught me how to show up, Naomi. And just like that, I realized something. She didn't need to change entirely. She just needed to try, to show up with her edges softened, to let go of the myth that love required power. Maybe that was enough. For the first time in our lives, maybe we were both enough. The morning of the wedding arrived like a whisper. No fanfare, no dramatic sunrise, just soft, silver light trickling through the hotel curtains. I blinked against it, still wrapped in the hush of sleep, half wondering if it was all still a dream. It wasn't. I sat up in bed, my heart ticking a little faster than usual. Maya was already awake, perched at the vanity with a steaming mug of tea and a curling iron. You ready to be a wife? She asked without looking up. I gave a breathy laugh. Ask me again after I finish this bagel. The suite was warm with the smell of citrus body mist and flat-ironed hair, and the quiet rustle of silk dresses being unzipped, adjusted, steamed. My dress hung near the window like a waiting promise. I hadn't cried yet. I hadn't let myself. Carol arrived just before the makeup artist. She didn't knock. She texted first outside your door. No chaos. Just me. I opened it. She stood there in a slate blue gown, her hair pinned back in a low chignon. She looked beautiful. Softer than usual. She held a small box in her hands. For you, she said. It was my grandmother's. Inside was a delicate silver hairpin, tiny opals clustered like a frost of stars. I had never seen it before. I was saving it, she said. For the daughter I was afraid I didn't deserve. I stared down at the pin, then at her. Thank you, I said, because it was all I could say without crying. Will you put it in for me? She smiled gently, nodded, and stepped behind me as I sat down. Her hands were warm against my scalp, steady, motherly. There it was, that word. For so long, it had felt like a title she wore but never lived. But today, it felt real. As she slid the pin into place, she looked at my reflection in the mirror. You look whole? I feel whole, I said. Finally. She rested her hands on my shoulders for a moment. Then I've done something right. The ceremony was set in the greenhouse, glowing with natural light filtered through hundreds of ivy leaves and hanging orchids. Candles lined the aisles. It smelled like citrus blossoms and early spring rain. The air was damp but soft, like a warm exhale. David stood at the altar in a navy suit, not tuxedo stiff but not casual either. He was exactly who I needed him to be: calm, grounded, eyes steady when mine wavered. When the music started, I waited behind the floral arch with my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. You okay? Maya asked. I nodded. Weirdly, yes. You're about to walk into the rest of your life, with your mother not interrupting it. I laughed. Don't jinx it. The doors opened, and I stepped forward. The guests stood. I saw flashes of faces, smiles, tears, awe. But I only focused on one David. His eyes never left mine. When I reached him, he took my hands in his. And suddenly the world narrowed to just the two of us. The officiant's voice rose and fell gently, words weaving like silk around the vines. I barely registered the script until it was my turn to speak. I looked into his eyes. I spent most of my life thinking love came with conditions, that I had to earn it, prove I deserved it. But with you, I didn't have to try. You loved me, even when I didn't believe I was lovable. And I promised to love you the same way, without question, without fear, without pause. He squeezed my hand, eyes glassy. I felt the weight of everyone watching, but I wasn't afraid. Not this time. His voice was quiet but sure when he said, I promise to never ask you to be smaller. I promise to never doubt the fire in you. I will build with you, walk beside you, and love every version of you, even the ones you're still becoming. There were sniffles, smiles, a few gasps when we kissed soft. Sure. Nothing theatrical. Just two people who had made it through the storm. When we walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, I saw Carol in the front row. She wasn't crying, but she was smiling genuinely, not for the camera, not for control, just for me. The reception was a blur of laughter, glasses clinking, people pulling me into hugs, old friends confessing they always knew it would be David, and children dancing in circles like petals in the wind. At one point, I stepped outside to breathe. The stars were just beginning to peek through the greenhouse roof, the sky going from navy to velvet black. I slipped out through a side door into the garden, away from the music. Carol found me there, 10 minutes later. I figured you'd be hiding, she said, holding a small glass of champagne. I'm not hiding. I'm breathing. Same difference, she said with a smile. She stood beside me, looking out at the small stone path lit with fairy lights. Then, after a long pause, I never had a wedding. I looked over. I know. Your father and I went to City Hall. No dress, no flowers, no family, just us and a judge who smelled like menthols. I waited. I didn't think I needed the ritual. I thought love was something you did, not something you displayed. But standing there today, watching you say those words, I realized maybe I missed something. I didn't say anything. Just let her speak. You taught me that, she added. That love deserves a ceremony. I turned toward her. Maybe love is the ceremony. She looked at me for a long moment. Then I'm honored to have witnessed yours. We stood in silence again. The music from the greenhouse drifted out like soft waves. I'm proud of you, Naomi, she said. Not just today. Always. This time, I didn't need to wonder if she meant it. I felt it. All the weight behind it. Thank you, I said softly. She handed me her champagne. Now go back inside before Maya starts the cha-cha slide without you. I laughed and took the glass. As I walked back in, I glanced one more time at her standing there alone in the garden, lit by fairy lights, eyes soft. And for the first time, she didn't look like a shadow from my past. She looked like someone choosing the light. David and I danced the last song barefoot. Shoes long forgotten, hair slightly undone, cheeks sore from smiling. The guests formed a loose circle around us, clapping along, some holding hands. When the music faded, David leaned in and whispered, "You did it." I whispered back, "We did it." He kissed my forehead, and in that quiet, perfect moment, no grand finale, no confetti, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The morning after the wedding was unremarkable in the most beautiful way. No horns, no violins, just the dull hum of a hotel heater, white sheets twisted around our legs, and the faint scent of leftover jasmine from my hair still hanging in the air. David was already awake, lying beside me, scrolling through photos on his phone, his hair a complete mess. I didn't care. He looked at me and smiled. "You snored," he whispered. "Did not. Only during the slow songs." I threw a pillow at him. He caught it and pulled me in. "I think we're officially boring now," I said. "Married boring," he corrected. "Which is basically just regular boring, but with shared passwords and a joint credit card." I laughed and buried my face in his shoulder. We lay there, silent, warm, still surrounded by the afterglow of the night before. It felt like being inside a memory you don't want to end. Eventually, we forced ourselves out of bed. There were goodbyes to be said, guests to thank, and suitcases to pack. The honeymoon wasn't until next week we'd both agreed we needed a few days to breathe first. As I packed my dress into a protective garment bag, I caught sight of the silver hairpin on the nightstand. Carol's gift. I reached for it, turning it over in my hand. The tiny opals sparkled faintly in the light, understated but radiant, like her apology, like our progress. David came up behind me, slid his arms around my waist. "Breakfast with your mom?" he asked. "Brunch," I corrected. She insisted on calling it brunch, said she reserved a table at that French place she loves. "You mean the one where the waiters wear ascots and judge your omelet order?" "That's the one." He grinned. "Can't wait to be silently shamed over eggs Benedict." We arrived 10 minutes early. She was already seated at a corner table, reading a hardcover book with her reading glasses perched low on her nose. A small carafe of water and a glass with lemon waited in front of her. "Hello, newlyweds," she said, standing. David leaned in to hug her without hesitation this time. I followed. The embrace felt easy, familiar. We sat. "I took the liberty of ordering pastries," she said, motioning to the silver tray in the center. "Croissants, raspberry tarts, mini quiches." I smiled. "Going soft on us." She smirked. "Don't push it." The waiter approached. Impossibly French. Impossibly serious. We ordered, and as he disappeared, Carol turned to David. "I owe you something more than an apology." He blinked. "Okay." She reached into her bag and pulled out a narrow envelope. "I had you checked out before I met you. I went too far." So I'm being transparent now. She slid the envelope across the table. What is it? I asked. Everything I found. Tax records, business history, background check, and a certified letter stating I've destroyed the digital copies. David didn't touch it. I'm not angry, he said. But I don't want it. She nodded. It's not for you to carry. It's for me to release. She tucked it back into her bag and folded her hands on the table. I was terrified you'd take her away, she said. And now I realize you brought her back to me. I exhaled slowly, feeling the pressure between my ribs dissolve like steam. You didn't lose me, I said. You just never saw me. She met my eyes. I see you now. After brunch, David left us to talk. Carol and I walked the long way to the parking garage past the farmer's market, through streets that smelled like roasted chestnuts and wet pavement. She held her clutch like a lifeline. You're not just my mother anymore, I said. You're a person. That changes things. She laughed, short and dry. You say that like it's a compliment. It is, I said. I spent so much of my life trying not to be you, and now I realize I was never becoming you. I was becoming me. You were just the mirror I kept checking. She looked down at her shoes. I wish I'd been a better one. You were flawed, I said. But you tried. That matters. We reached her car. She unlocked it but didn't open the door. Can I tell you something? She asked. Of course, I envy you. I frowned. Me. You built something without losing yourself. I don't think I ever managed that. I didn't know what to say. I want to keep learning, she added. Not as your parent. Just as someone trying to earn her place in your life? I nodded, eyes stinging. You already have a place. It just looks different now. She smiled, then opened her door. Before she got in, she turned and said, Naomi. Yeah, I love you. Not the version I imagined. Just you. And then she left. Back at our apartment, I curled up on the couch with a mug of tea and my laptop. The inbox was overflowing wedding vendors, client requests, honeymoon confirmations. I clicked open a folder labeled Letters I Never Sent. It was a collection I'd started years ago, unsent emails to Carol, drafted late at night when I felt too angry or too small to speak. I read through a few. You made me feel invisible at every milestone. Why couldn't you just say you were proud? You scared me more than the world ever did. And then I opened a new one. Subject, you were right about one thing. You were right to say, people don't always love without reason. But you were wrong to think that meant love was a lie. David doesn't love me because I'm easy to love. He loves me because he sees the hard parts and stays anyway. That's the kind of love you never trusted. I hope one day you can... Naomi. I didn't send it. I saved it. I didn't need her to read it. I just needed to write it. David came home a few hours later with a bouquet of tulips and 2 tacos from our favorite truck. Lunch for my brilliant wife, he said, kissing the top of my head. I smiled, closed my laptop, and pulled him down onto the couch with me. I'm thinking of writing again. I said, personal essays. Maybe. About families. About the ways we hurt and heal. I'd read that. He said, even the ones about you. He grinned. Especially those. We ate tacos in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. The kind where everything that matters has already been said. That night, I stood by the window, watching the lights of the city blink like faraway stars. The dress hung in the closet now. The flowers had wilted. The cake was gone. The party had ended. But something else was just beginning. A life not built in reaction to someone else's choices. A marriage made not to escape, but to expand. And a relationship with my mother delicate, repaired, and real. No fairy tale, No tidy bow, just the quiet truth. She changed. I changed. And somehow, we met each other in the middle.